Hi, I'm Barry Zworenstein. I'm a South African trained clinical psychologist. My background as a clinician is in psychodynamic and psychoanalytic psychotherapy, and I'm also a combat veteran from the Rhodesian Bush War in the mid-1970s. I was taken on as a contract psychologist with Veteran Services here in Australia in 2002 and have spent 15 years solely working with veterans in terms of my private practice. It has been an incredibly interesting journey and an evolving journey for me over the 15 years. And I guess the best thing I can say at this point is that as much as I have impacted on the men and the women that I have sat with, they in turn have had a profound impact on me. My life has been transformed. I believe that I'm a better person, I'm a better therapist, I'm a better psychologist, and I'm a better veteran and a better man. So it's been an experience in which it's impossible to sit with extraordinary warriors and not be changed. I think my attitude has always been, if I'm sitting there purely from the therapist's point of view and my humanity and my humanness and my ability to connect and relate is not present, and if I believe that I can't be impacted on and that there is not wisdom that we both benefit from within the session, then something gets lost in terms of the relational component. After about 2 years of working with veterans, I realized that I was not the perfect combination of psychologist and veteran, and that I knew what I was going to do, and that I was fully processed, and that I was there to help heal predominantly the men that I was working with at that time. There was very much the sort of World War II and Vietnam era. It was one point when I was listening to somebody talking to me and I realized, oops, I think I've got a room where, as I said in my book, I've got a few claymores sitting in that room, things that I hadn't dealt with. And that realization was, I think, the beginning of me embodying a more human and, I think, respectful and grounded presence to the folk that I was working with. I think I'm always very grateful for my background because on the one hand, there's the part of me that listens as a clinician, and as a clinician to have had the gift of the psychodynamic and psychoanalytics understandings, which brings a very human and relational component into understanding and connecting with human beings. And the other one is certainly my veteran. My veteran, I guess, has in many ways transformed how I work, how I think, and how I communicate. And I think this is really evidenced in my book, Which Way Is Your Claymore Facing?, which really is a conversation with men around tools and strategies using operational language. So it's a language that guys, males and females, automatically go, I understand what you're saying, this works for me. This is territory I understand, these are tools I understand, these are terms and concepts I understand. Now, over the years of working with veterans, I guess what came to me was that I could see that the psychologist part of me was definitely creating change. People were coming away a lot more integrated, a lot more in peace inside themselves. The veteran side of me was sending people away with an understanding of their territory and giving them an inner compass to navigate their way more effectively into civilian lives and their connections with their wives and friends and work and children. But I still was not getting to the deep underlying trauma. I would often sit there and go, I'm not getting somewhere. These folk are leaving my room and they're still stuck in almost deep at the back of the brain where encapsulated trauma is held. And for years, I'd sit there just often feeling quite stumped, quite stuck, and often battling with a sense of failing. So for those of you who have had this experience out there, don't worry. It's part of the challenge of growth. And so I started to think, there's something missing in my toolbox. So what I began to do was to explore what could I add to my toolbox to really allow a more and deeper healing experience within the connection with the people that I was sitting with. So the first thing I started looking at over a number of years was neuroscience in the brain. And I was really fortunate to have incredible training with a remarkable human being around the brain, around neuroscience, around trauma, and just how it manifested in the body, and a lot of brain-based and neuroscience-based modalities. So now I had a language to start to talk to veterans about, front of the brain, back of the brain, blood flow to the front of the brain, what happens when the back of the brain is kicking up and there's no blood flow, and how you get stuck in raw emotion, raw trauma, and you're just not going anywhere. It's driving you. You can't organize it, you can't process it, you can't think about it. So now that was the beginning of starting to feel, okay, I'm now beginning to get into this territory in a lot more of an effective way. I was moving away from psychodynamic stuff. I was moving away from other aspects that I was using as a psychologist, and I was beginning to deepen and bring more complex tools in. Then after a bit of time, I started to go, well, there needs to be more to this. I need more tools. And I came across the territory of energy psychology. And by energy psychology, many of you may have heard about tapping or emotional freedom therapy. And that looks at using pressure points, tapping points within the body, here, and there, where as you tap on them, it fires up the back of the brain. We know that because it works. We know when we put people's brains under scanning machines and we tap on these points, it's called like acupuncture without needles. People's brains fire up, and by using this modality called tapping, what we're doing is we're taking encapsulated trauma with the emotion that's locked in, and we're separating the emotion, processing it, so people can look at the encapsulated trauma and go, okay, I can look at that contact and I'm okay. I don't have these upregulated and traumatic feelings and experiences that go with the memory. So I used this a lot and still continue to use it today. It's used all over the world, not just with the veteran population, but certainly in terms of what I'm talking about today. It's very, very effective. And what I love about it is that it gives the people I'm sitting with a tool to take home. So at the end of the day, what I'm looking at is when people walk out of my room, what can I give you that you can take back so you don't always have to wait for the next session? You've got stuff that puts you back in the driver's seat and that leaves you feeling quite empowered. So the next step after looking at energy psychology was energy medicine. I happened to be looking a little bit and doing a little bit of research and came across Donna Eden, who is an into energy medicine in the USA. And she does a lot of work around bilateral movements, and she shows how these realign the meridians in the body. And there's, in a sense, the link of the energy medicine and the energy psychology is that all the points in our body that we use in acupuncture, for those of you who've had acupuncture, is that it works on the meridians of the body. It lines up your energy. And from there, I started to think, okay, I've got tools that when folk came into my room, I'd go, look, I'm going to give you a couple of things that you can take away. So I'm going to give you a 5-minute sequence of energy medicine. I'm going to show you some tapping. I'm going to give you some 4-7-8 breathing. You can look at these on my website if you go to the blogs and look at tools. And so I would immediately train people in this. Often they would walk into my room and I go, how are you feeling today? And the guy would go, listen, mate, I'm like 100 out of 10. You just don't want to mess with me today. And I go, okay, I'm going to show you some pretty weird stuff. I just want you to copy me. One guy actually said to me, he said, mate, where are the cameras in your room? I said, no, don't worry. I know it looks weird, but let's just give it a go. And we'd run through this various sequence. And after about 10 minutes, I'd say to him, how are you doing? And he'd say to me, what have you done to me? It's like, I feel like I'm back in my body. This 100 out of 10 is 0 at the moment. I don't know what you've done, but I'm feeling great. And having more and more of these experiences with men, I realized that I needed to learn to get more into the body. As long as I was quack, 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 quack here, I was limiting the depth to which the folk I was sitting with and myself could actually process and heal, profoundly traumatic experiences. So I needed to learn how to start and work deeply in the body. And that became a really powerful journey for me to start to look at, okay, so now I've got my veteran wisdom, I've got my psychologist, psychodynamic, psychoanalytic wisdom, I've got some of my body-based wisdom, the breathing, the tapping, the energy psychology and the energy medicine, but there was something that was still wanting more. So I did training in EMDR, which many of you might have heard, and it's evidence-based, it's highly effective, it's brilliant, but somehow it wasn't quite connecting with me. It's not about the modality, but I wasn't connecting with it. And I think a part of that is because I'm so steeped in a psychodynamic tradition, which is really about connecting. It's the depth of the relationship. And I didn't want to lose that in something which was very structured and telling people what they needed to do. I wanted something which had more of a flow and was perhaps a softer, gentler approach. And I was very fortunate to come across a technique called brain spotting, developed by David Grand. And brain spotting it's probably a joy for me to have gone, I've had an aha moment. I've found something which profoundly fits with who I am. And in a nutshell, brain spotting essentially combines the relational component. David himself comes from a very strong psychodynamic and what I call a really human, compassionate, heart-opened place of sitting with people. And you can feel it when you're sitting with somebody like that. But he also identified that we needed to also have the neurobiological component. And by neurobiological, I'm going back to my training in the brain, in neuroscience, and the body. And David identified that. And I challenge you to, when you're looking at people talking about a situation, watch where their eye goes. Sometimes I'll go, I remember when that happened, and their eyes will go there, there, or there. And David's technique simply says, I noticed your eye was looking over there. Why don't you hold that position and just keep talking? Now, it's a bit more complex than that, and I'm really simplifying it. But his whole approach was where the brain goes, the eye goes, where the eye goes, the brain goes. So in terms of military sites, there's a line of fire between the deep memory you're trying to get to within the brain and the body and locking in an eye position. So it locks in the front and the deep back of the brain. And it would essentially go, somebody would walk into my room and I'd say to them, okay, so what do you want to work at tonight? And they go, well, tonight I really want to work on an experience that I had in a contact where this and this happened. And I've got a lot of grief and guilt, and I just like to work in that. So now what we've done is we've opened up memory, we've had a conversation. So the next step is, so where do you feel that in your body? How intense is the emotion and where do you feel it in your body? And so they might say to me, look, I've got all this stress, this anxiety, this guilt. It's sitting in my chest, it's sitting in my stomach, and it's about a 10 out of 10 at the moment. It's really acute. Now we move into the body, because the body and the brain have an inherent wisdom. So then all I'd be saying is, I just want you to stay, hold that eye position. I want you to stay in your body, feel the experience, and just simply see what comes up. And more as I've worked with body-based modalities, I realize there's an intuitive wisdom to the brain, where when we combine or connect a number of pathways, the brain automatically starts to release. We don't have to get stuck in years of conversation. We don't have to have strictly prescribed ways of working. It's just facilitating a connection and allowing the brain and the body to release. And a guy may go, oh, wow, this is what's come up now. And the response at that point is, I just want you to stay with it. Just stay with that and see what comes up. And the brain and the body just release and release and release. And in a way, as David says, the client or the person, for me, it's the man or the woman sitting, the veteran sitting opposite me. They lead, we just simply follow. We respectfully follow. And I think this has made a huge difference for me in the work I do, because it's a heart-opening experience. I don't always have to push myself or struggle to come up with solutions. And as David says, when you tell somebody what you think is happening, you've got it wrong, because the brain's extremely complex. We just have to allow the brain and the body an opportunity to release and communicate and speak. And it's allowed me to really sit back and just listen and watch in absolute wonderment as the brain and the body release. And predominantly the men I sit with find absolute peace and transformation. See, I'm not saying that there's a problem with a lot of the, as I've said before, with a lot of the evidence-based approaches, but my approach has always been, I want to find a way of sitting with an open heart, deep respect and deep care. I want to be able to bring my clinical training, and I want to be able to allow my veteran side to sit with me, and I want to bring the body and the brain-based tools, and we all have a conversation together. And we create an environment and an energy in the room which facilitates the deepest healing in a way that does no harm and that doesn't stress or freak people out. I'm not saying that when we process wounds that we don't experience pain or grief, but I personally am not comfortable with modalities that push people into the middle of their ambush zone or push people into the middle of trauma. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It just doesn't fit with me. And so my personal transformation is that increasingly I've recognized, point one is that as a clinician, I'm not some omnipresent person sitting on a chair. I'm a human being. I'm a veteran. I often say to the guys, the only difference between us is that I'm a lot older than you, but I'm kind of a couple of steps ahead of you because of my chronology. But we sit as men in the room together, and as we have conversations, we both transform. We bring who we are and the authenticity of the various parts of ourselves into this room. I must admit, in hindsight, I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity of having sat with extraordinary human beings, warriors, over so many years. I think with a lot of veterans, what often came up with me is when I was sitting with Special Force soldiers, either currently serving or having transitioned into civilian life, and these huge, highly capable, multifunctioning, highly intelligent men would enter my room who'd been to indescribably difficult and challenging places on the planet, fighting very complex wars. It was very difficult not to feel inadequate, not to feel good enough. And I've seen that in a lot of veterans, and it was a very lived experience for me, where I realized that as veterans, we do not need to define ourselves by killing. We define ourselves by the fact that we have put on uniform and we've entered territory. How we enter territory from veteran or current serving is very different from person to person. And I find a lot of veterans struggle with a sense of incompleteness and not good enough because they either never had the opportunity to go on operations, or they simply went on operations and never had an opportunity to kill. Now, I think the killing is a very complex one. I tend to work very hard at not allowing killing to define who we are as warriors, but I understand that killing is part of the journey, and the being able to kill is certainly, without that wiring, it's very difficult to actually put foot in operational territory. What I also realize, and what I've covered a lot with veterans, is that there's a kind of dimmer switch emotionally. And I've often said to veterans, do you ever have a sense that your emotional response is somewhat slightly muted? If you draw a line and the top of the line is the ability to experience extreme joy, abandonment, just to let yourself go. I've said to veterans, don't you often feel it's a kind of very low sine wave? And they go, yeah, it's not that I don't feel, but I don't have those rapid highs or lows of feeling. Underneath that line, of course, if you've got anger or irritation or reactivity, veterans certainly can be extremely trigger-edged, highly reactive, and that's something that they need to moderate and work with. But it's that sense of, one, not feeling good enough, two, I just don't feel things properly, three, I feel I've almost got a more intimate connection with my own tribe than often with my children or my wife. And it's understanding with veterans and helping them to understand that this transition from war to civilian life is a very complex one, and that we need to learn to allow our veteran to walk with us, to inform us, to gather its wisdom, and to normalize a lot of the experiences that we or that veterans have that are actually okay. So I've rambled a little bit, but in a sense, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have sat and listened to the most incredible stories all my life. I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to learn to understand the importance of neuroscience and the brain, and perhaps more important than anything else, I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to have understand the absolute power of understanding how the body works, how trauma lives in the body, how experience lives in the body. And instead of starting from the top and working down, it's to start from the bottom in the body and then work up. So I guess I'm on a journey of evolving and changing, It's constant. I'm sure until my dying day, I'll be processing aspects of myself as a veteran, as a human being, in all the many roles of my life. But this is the joy of being who we are. I wish you all a good journey. For those of you that are healers, I wish you a journey in which you bring your compassion, your respect, and an open-heartedness into the people that you sit with, whether you're coaches, psychologists, healers, yoga teachers, whatever it may be. I wish you a journey in which you open yourself to the possibilities of learning about the brain and neuroscience and the body, and maybe even brain spotting and any other modality you may come upon. But most of all, I wish you an extraordinary journey in which you too not only transform the people you sit with, but in turn are transformed by the people that you in turn sit with. Have a good day, and looking forward to catching up with you again soon. Take care. Bye.